I've done a bit of a look in at the what's behind Echuca Management Victoria and State Emergency Services. Now, I'm not talking about the volunteers, and I'm not talking about the people on the floor or the people doing the hard work. I'm talking about the way they're set up and the administration and their board. So in the Emergency Management Victoria, there's no board. There are three people. There's the Minister, the Emergency Manager Chief, and there's the CEO, and that's it. It's a body corporate, just like any other company, and it runs under the insignia of the Victorian government under Act of Parliament. That's fine. What's not okay about Emergency Management Victoria is that it hasn't done an operational review for 6 years. Up until then, it did an operational review every year. That review revealed the strengths and the weaknesses. It determined the knowledge of how to grow and what to do. Think of the technology changes that have been missed in those operational reviews. It is unbelievable to think that the Minister, the Commander, and the CEO could have forgotten to do their operational review for 6 years. That needs investigation. So back in 2016-17, when they last did an operational review, this is what the previous emergency management commissioner and controller said. Operational review is part of an ongoing cycle of learning and improvement and aims to highlight good practice, changes and improvements that have occurred across the Victorian emergency management sector. 2016-2017 assurance activities occur throughout the year, and the outcomes of these activities are then collated to analyse and identify good practice and opportunities for learning and improvement. These insights are then available to the departments and agencies and teams and committees to utilise the information provided on the operational review to inform continuous improvement activities. Well, it's a big problem having that missing for 6 years. State Emergency Services, well, they've got a board. Who would you expect to find on the State Emergency Services Board? What kind of knowledge? Would there be an engineer somewhere? A hydrology engineer? Would there be even one of the experts on the University of Melbourne find an expert on the knowledge of flooding, firefighting, communities? No. There are some probably well-earned people on there in relation to their contributions over the years as being in the State Emergency Services for lengthy periods of time. But the board isn't a board of people that knows how to manage emergencies. The board is a board of people that know how to manage a business and its people. Because at that board level and through the documentation, it appears the focus is on who they are and not what they're there for. It's representative in the board. I'm not saying that they've got the wrong intention, but it looks stale. And it needs an inquiry. While we're talking about the State Emergency Services, their operational procedures, well, they're pretty good. The manual's pretty good. The only thing that is a problem from what I can see is the interpretation at management level and the labyrinth of complexity it's almost unreadable. It's like one of those council documents you read on policy. It lacks any sort of plain English, and it's very unreasonable to think that someone could be slotted into a seat to say, right, you're the incident controller here today. Did you read the manual? The answer's going to be no, I didn't. If I did, I didn't understand it. That needs a review. And there's a section about the incident controller. The local incident controller can go ahead and build a levy if they deem fit, if there's sufficient threat. There's a lot of conditions. You've got to keep logbooks. You've got to refer to a lot of people. You've got to go through a chain of stuff. But you can do it. But you can't do it to damage property and to deliberately inundate people and to cause them harm. That's not it. That's not what it says. It says if it's necessary to do it to prevent those things happening, not make those things happen. So like I've stated earlier, it's probably reasonable to think that maybe things got overwhelming, it just got on top of them. It was coming from all directions and probably still is. There's nothing to say that in 4 weeks' time we won't be back in the same situation. But the more you dig into how these organisations are set up and how the decisions get made, the more you see there's very little chance of anything going right. All those footages that you see on the emergency services websites of people being saved and people being lifted into boats and all that, that's fine. Appreciate all that. It's tremendous effort from the people on the ground doing the work. But in this town, something stopped that from happening. That wasn't the plan. The plan has to have been, give an evacuation order. We're not going there till the 17th when we start building our levy. They've been told to get out, let them look after themselves. That's what it sounds like after me speaking with CFA people. Doesn't cut it, needs to be investigated. The reason I can say that is they weren't here. I'll show you right now who was here the day before on the 15th, the day before on the 16th, while the town was struggling by itself, using what's called in emergency services lingo, the resilience of community is their great asset, and that is, they'll do it. They'll do the sandbags. They'll provide the numbers. They'll do all this stuff. All right? That's what you see. But you won't see a fluoro jacket. You won't see a red and white car. You won't see orange and white checks. You won't see any of that stuff. You won't see shy people. You won't see anyone in those days leading up to the day of that announcement. And that's when it all happened. There's no doubt that when the Campaspe, just like last time, came here in a rage, enough to have refrigerators and car bodies going down past backs of people's houses. The CFA got right onto that. They did. Up at Campaspe Esplanade. Around the perimeter of the town, there were some things being addressed. Last minute things, like I say, but these events have taken weeks. In the case of the Murray, it's taken 3 months for it to build up its height and eventually hit here. And unfortunately, with catastrophic events with the Campaspe in Rochester and other places further down the line in South Australia, and those guys were on the media a few days later as if, did anyone notice there's a wall of water coming towards us? Let's get ready. Maybe it's everywhere. So let's do this. We know what empathy means. Empathy means putting yourself in the shoes of someone else and experiencing and feeling what they feel and how you would deal with it. So imagine you're there on the 17th of October at 10 o'clock, and by the time it's finished 10:45, you've learned that you've got to go home. You've got to, mind you, there's no plan if you're unwell, if you have people with disabilities, if you're aged and would find it difficult, if if you have a family of 10. They don't care. Go home. You've been told to evacuate. Go home and evacuate. You've got 15 minutes. Because we've got 48 hours. We've got just 48 hours to build a levee. They called on the children. They called on mothers and fathers and children to help where they can, to go and pack sandbags. How would you feel when you go back home? You've been given the news, only to find that while you're at the meeting, the trucks and the diggers and the bobcats and everything else that's needed to do it are already there. They're already surrounding your house. You can't get your car out. You can't get your car in. You can't get in without difficulty. You can't get out. It's an overwhelming scene. I don't think any Victorian, any Australian should have that deliberately thrust upon them, let alone to be not told the truth. And the truth was, by the consultants, this is how it is. This is what we're expecting. This is why the levees are where they are, and this is the height. And what we're going to do is we're going to pump all of the water out of the stormwater that sits underneath this town with an inundating rain event. And we're going to pump it into your houses. We're going to make a bad situation worse. We're going to disconnect you from the stormwater system. In other words, you just don't matter. Your title doesn't matter. You don't matter. Your kids don't matter. Your property doesn't matter. The things you've worked your life for don't matter. Nothing mattered because you were chosen to be the victim, the sacrificial lambs to save the town. In Operation Town Protect, wherever that came from, there were 32 stations pumping water from the stormwater back into behind that levee. Fortunately, their predictions were totally wrong. The numbers that were presented to them just didn't cut it. None of that happened. But the damage happened. The damage to those people happened. We need to know why it happened, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen again, ever.
That one up there is working as well. At this young guy's house right here. Why? So the river's that way and it's coming to the east. Why are they flooding this bit? This isn't river water, this is storm drain water. Into this young guy's house. Congealing here, making a mess. Hardly anything here, little bit running down. We've got these two pipes here. Running down, running down. Okay, so as you can see, the hoses have been moved up here again when they were asked last night to make sure that they faced towards the south end so that the water can run down along here and down to the river. The water is coming this way. The river's this way, it's coming that way. So why would they be filling up this area, which is knee deep now, with filthy, dirty stormwater, when it can be hooked up? These hoses hook up, as you can see. They can hook up with that one, they can hook up with that one, they can hook up with that one. There's 5 there that can be hooked up and sent halfway down this levee. They were asked to do it last night to protect this house and this house, the house next door, to join up with the flowing river that's coming down Pakenham Street. I said that they would look into it. They were concerned that they didn't have funds for a hose, for hoses. I said, well, you've got all day to find them tomorrow. Nothing's been done, except for flooding this young fella's house.